What is up, everybody? Welcome to the latest and hopefully greatest Stallions podcast, State of the Stallions. I'm your host, Luke Miller. I got into covering the Stallions a year ago because I wanted to show the team that I loved in the city that I loved the respect that I felt like they deserved and weren't getting. And now it's 2024. It's a new year with a new league. We've got two championships under our belt, but it's time for a third. And so I thought, what can I do to try and make Stallions coverage in 2024 even better than it was in 2023? In a podcast had always been on my radar, but I was only going to do it if I could do it right. And part of doing it right meant bringing you the voices of the people that you want to hear from. And so, with that being said, I am honored to say that today, for our very first episode, we have an exclusive interview. We have an interview with someone who has never done an interview before like this. And it's my privilege to get to share with you, Stallions Nation, your general manager, Zach Potter. I know all kinds of you have wanted to hear from this man. You've wanted to pick his brain. Who is the guy pulling the strings and building this juggernaut of a roster that's dominated spring football for the last 2 years? Well, today is your chance to get to hear from him directly. So sit back, relax, and enjoy hearing from the man, the myth, the legend, Zach Potter. Without further ado, here we go.
Here we go. Let's go. Hey, giddy up on three. 1, 2, 3. Giddy up.
You can feel the buzz when you're around this city. People have fallen in love with the Birmingham Stallions. Here we go. We're getting a little juice going. Birmingham is going to win the USFL championship.
Welcome to the very first episode of State of the Stallions. I'm your host, Luke Miller, and we are joined today with a really exciting guest that I know everyone's going to be excited to hear from, and that's the Stallions general manager, Zach Potter. Zach, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Appreciate the invite on the show, and I tell you what, this is the first show that I've been on from a podcast standpoint, video standpoint. I've turned down a lot of them, and you're somebody that's been with us since year one, and I certainly wanted to give back.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that a ton. I know, obviously, the general manager role is not always a front-facing role like Skip Holtz or some of the players. You're not being drug around to different interviews and things like that, and you don't usually have that in your contract. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. It's certainly an honor. Maybe what we could do, I thought maybe just to get us started here is would love to just get a little bit more background on you. I know some people maybe have read the piece that RJ Young sort of wrote about you, but other than that, you kind of just emerged on the scene as the Stallions became this juggernaut over the last couple of years, and people were like, who's pulling all these roster strings? And then there's kind of this name that started to get thrown around more and more and more. But I think a lot of people might not fully know your story or background of how you got to be kind of where you are today. So I'd love to just get a little bit more about kind of your story and how you ended up with the Birmingham Stallions.
Yep. No, absolutely. I tell you, from the start of it, I'm extremely young to be in the position that I'm in today. I'm only 23, and normally after the fifth or the sixth phone call to the recruit, I go, man, you know how old I am, and sometimes they guess, okay, maybe 30, 35, and I go, now most days I'm younger than all, and obviously as my age continues to climb, that'll get a little bit more rare. But my story has been a short one, something that I've obviously enjoyed, something that's nowhere near complete just in terms of a goals portion of it. But RJ wrote a great piece on my life and really detailed home on some of the early transactions on kind of where I've been from a job to job description. So I got extremely lucky if we're starting all the way back just in terms of how did I at least get into the driver's seat to interview for the job with the Birmingham Stallions. That really takes place back in 2017. I was a junior in high school. I got approached by the principal stating that just from kind of where you come from, parents, household, money, income, you don't really come from a lot. Is there any way we can help you guarantee from a GPA standpoint? You've been unbelievable, but can we help you get into college a little bit cheaper? So kind of what they did for me, my entire senior year, of high school. I was actually on a junior college campus trying to complete my associates, and kind of why that's so important. I worked at the first day I get on campus as a junior college student. I walked straight to the football office and said, "Hey, I'm a new college student. What are the chances I can work with you guys?" And they took me in, and at the time I interviewed with the offensive coordinator to just be a student assistant there. His first name is Donnie, last name is Woods. Why that's so important? Because 3 years later, Brian Woods eventually starts the USFL, and we'll kind of get a little bit more into that. So I worked with those guys for 2 years, and that was a program started by Tom Osborne. Their record as today as the back-to-back champs in junior college football is 120 and 15 or something stupid like that. And I, from a culture standpoint, winning, recruiting, personnel, everything in terms of how to build the championship program, I really got lucky there. But it starts there, and as I graduated in 1 year of my associates, I went to Nebraska. This was actually during the COVID season. I ended up staying an extra year at junior college as we fell one game short of the championship. Notable running back on that team was Quandre White at the time, and there's a couple great other players on our team that made it to the NFL. But as I went to Nebraska, it was during COVID, and they kind of told me that, hey, we're not looking to hire anybody right now. We're going to kind of keep things at a minimize right now, not knowing what's going to happen. And I believe after kind of the September, I believe it was late August, they end up saying that, Big Ten's back. We're playing football. So I ended up jumping into Nebraska, and as I spent 2 seasons with the Nebraska football team, mainly actually on the video aspect of it, just because they didn't have any jobs and personnel. I get a call back from Brian Woods that, hey, we're starting the spring league, and this thing's going to be on Fox. And knowing that I always wanted to do personnel, he invited me out. So I had the chance to work beside Steve Kazar, Bobby Morris, Mike Woods, and of course in a league ran by Brian Woods. And kind of short story short, eventually what happened is one thing after another. Brian Woods owns the keys to the USFL. He starts it. He starts hiring all the coaches. He eventually hires myself to be an office assistant. And I was really adamant about only wanting to stay as a office employee. I kind of know the scares of being a frontline player, having to work day to day with the coaches, having to work with the schemes and knowing exactly who they've already hired with Billy Devaney, Steve Kazar, Bobby Morris. I mean, all these guys with great NFL backgrounds. And I get the call from Brian Woods that Skip's looking for somebody younger and somebody that kind of has a chip on their shoulder, somebody that eventually wants to kind of work in football rather than some guys that maybe are exiting the NFL. He was more or less kind of looking for, being in college football for the 30 years that he was and kind of always being the general manager or the CEO of the roster, the day-to-day, or how to run his football team. He really wasn't looking for a quote-unquote GM. He was really looking for just somebody to assist on the personnel aspect of it. And somebody that more or less he could kind of work hand in hand with rather than what the title may say. And I still remember the phone call he called me, and I think I was out in Vegas at the East-West game, and I think our phone call ended up going for 3.5 hours. And I mean, I got chills. All we talked about was trying to build a winning team. All we talked about was what are the appropriate ways to win football games, just in terms of what does winning mean for us and how do we want that to scream in our culture and our organization. And that not only goes to how you started, but the type of players that you bring in, the type of coaches that you bring in, the type of support staff that you bring in. And it's not too many times you're continuously walking into a winning organization with structure and keys. But I think this journey started when I was 17 years old, and today I'm 23 years old, and this thing has been kind of nonstop just in terms of hopping on the wheel. So, Skip, we can get into all the kind of the first year meetings and the draft portion of it, building the big board and the construction of what the team was going to look like. But I said I'm super fortunate that Skip took a chance on me. Somebody that was coming from college, maybe not knowing necessarily whether if it was going to be an interview in college a year or two later, whether this USFL, UFL thing was going to work out. I mean, he put a ton of trust in me, but mainly it's because he's got trust in himself and he's got trust in the process. And he's an unbelievable leader, CEO type of person, and he's certainly somebody that we certainly want guiding our ship. So it's been an unbelievable 3 seasons so far.
Yeah, I know it's certainly on the fan side of things. It's been an amazing ride, and I can only imagine behind the scenes what that's been like. And I want to kind of circle back. You mentioned a little bit, kind of that first year and what it was like to connect with Skip and really build something from the ground up. And I'm curious, obviously there's probably a lot of stories you could tell and a lot you could say, but if maybe you could kind of take us back to that first year, that 2022 season. The Stallions, obviously, it didn't take long to kind of figure out that there was something special in Birmingham. Just seeing the way that the players clicked and came together and the culture that sort of coalesced so quickly into that year. And obviously we know that that turned into the first USFL championship back in 2022. But just curious if you could kind of maybe give us a little insight into what it was like of just sort of starting from ground zero and building that kind of initial roster and how, you and Skip and others worked together to make that happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One kind of the main point of emphasis when I got started, everything I did was analytics. That's how I believe, and that's how kind of my original belief was in the scouting world, the scouting community was I wanted to look for things that were kind of going to be really hard to find in our league, but still had something from a trait standpoint that could relate to the NFL organization. And that's kind of how I told Skip when we were always going back and forth on draft meetings was, hey, we're just going to look for the best of what we can find for our league. We wanted to find somebody rare in our league and that maybe not too many other prospects may hold in terms of that standard. So the draft process is extremely fun because if anybody knows Skip from how he's coached football, been around football, everything for Coach Holtz screams blue chip work ethic, just as long as their feet touch the ground, we couldn't give two shits, and that's kind of the way that he's looked at it. If the first thing I tell Skip is this guy's a football player, his ears are going to get huge, his eyes are going to get big, and there's going to be a spark to it, and he's going to want to listen to me. But if I start this guy ran a 4.41, broad this, explosive is this, the short shuttle is this, hands this, I mean, the guy is like, tone it down a little bit. Let's stick to the football player. Let's stick to the intangibles. Let's stick to the work ethic. Who have we called? Have we called the coach? Have we called the NFL scout? Have we called the strength conditioning? Who are we connected to just to know whether or not this guy is going to be a scheme fit and a culture fit? And most importantly, what's his mindset? So learning the intangible part of it and what makes a football player is really important to how we have always incorporated our players on our roster. So year one was awesome. Skip and I always joke about the movie Moneyball. That's something that himself, the wife, me, we have talked about forever. Is just kind of the comparison of the Moneyball, just in terms of analytics, in terms of the guy that maybe shouldn't be in the position without the opportunity presented to himself, and then eventually it turning into something special. So year one was a blast, just in terms of putting all the players on a board, having a chance to stack everybody up, having a chance to compare the open rounds compared to the by position rounds, the strategy behind it, and then eventually forming a team good enough to hopefully go to training camp to see what you have. I don't think none of us really knew what we had until we got to training camp, and that's kind of the fun of it. What Skip did really, really well was, one, coming from college, he's going to know how to build that team chemistry quicker than any coach. And I think if you look back at the year one, the college coaches really found success from a head coaching standpoint. And then what he also did a great job was hiring position coaches that have coached in pro football, whether if it's the NFL, CFL, Spring League, XFL in 2020, just people that understand that we're going to be jumping through hurdles a lot. This isn't college football. You don't have a huge budget or a huge staff, and we're going to work really with one hand tied behind our back, and we're going to do the best job that we can humanly possibly can. And Coach Holtz kind of saying from year one is stay flexible. This thing's always going to have a different turn than what we originally panned it out to be. And as long as we stay flexible, things aren't going to happen that we're not prepared for. And that's kind of really been the tail of the tape from year one.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, you hit on it. Like, it was interesting to see looking back, how some of the college coaches really seemed to have a lot of success that first year, which was, I think at least as kind of from the couch fan perspective, I didn't know what to expect. It's kind of like this is a different world, but it makes sense, like you said, when you're kind of bringing together all these different guys from all these different places and all these different experiences and trying to quickly sort of form a team. It makes sense that that would help when you hit the ground running. And we've talked some about the past. I kind of want to skip a beat here and look a little bit to the future before we kind of talk about the 2024 season and the Stallions roster as it's currently comprised. I just wanted to maybe kind of get your thoughts on this kind of whole merger business that's happened. Obviously last year we had the XFL and the USFL. As everyone kind of knows now, they're merged. We have the UFL, 8 teams, Birmingham being one of those 8 that made the cut. We've heard some about the merger experience, kind of from coaches, from players, but maybe not as much from somebody in your shoes, right? And kind of the front office, GM, personnel side of things. So just curious to hear both kind of your thoughts overall on sort of the merger and bringing these 2 leagues together, as well as what it's sort of been like for you and how it's affected, doing your job. And, obviously there's the aspect of building the roster, which we'll talk more about, but just kind of curious to get your thoughts on a new league, new season, and more new things in your life.
Oh, the merger really is a good thing, and I can't say that enough. I mean, having 8 teams in 2 different leagues compete against each other, really from a financial standpoint, just isn't the smartest thing. And then also from the fans sitting at home trying to figure out what league to root for, what team to cheer for, and then also knowing that past spring leagues have kind of always found a way to unfortunately fail, and large portion of that is because of the financial burden of the league. So putting this league together with 8 teams, I wish it was more. I think everybody wishes that there were more teams, and hopefully that's something they'll continue to do, is expand. But this is great for spring football. This is great from the competition standpoint. This is great from the evaluation standpoint in terms of the NFL going, hey, this league has the best of the best. Let's evaluate just in terms of how they compete against each other, what they do from a production standpoint, and most importantly, how the film looks. So I do believe from an opportunity standpoint, this league is going to be the best way to get back into the NFL. And I'm extremely fortunate to still be here, extremely fortunate that Birmingham has found a way to be successful for the past 2 seasons. And then obviously, looking forward as well. But I say this is really a good thing, and the evaluation of the player was probably the hardest aspect of it, because none of us really knew what was going to happen. There was always a curveball. Every week there was something else that kind of popped up, and something else that maybe we heard, and it was really hard to prepare for. And then when we got the final wording that we could only protect X amount of players, that's really when the difficult challenge began, because most importantly, we were just coming off of a back-to-back champion, 21-3 players that have put their all into this organization just as much as any of us, and all of a sudden now we have to unprotect players. So that was kind of the really ugly part of the business. But I know that the majority of the Stallions kind of found a way to bounce back and found the way to be, whether if it's on a different UFL roster or finding a way to sign up to a team in Canada. That's kind of been the ugly part of the business. But moving forward, obviously, I'm really fortunate to still be here with the team, and I think we're all ready for season 3 to start.
Yeah, maybe if we could talk a little bit more about that. I remember when all this kind of news came out about the merger, and then when it started to kind of come out how the rosters were going to be sort of taking shape once we knew there was going to be 8 teams. I think at least for the Stallions, maybe, well, I'll go out on a limb here and say, maybe if your team had struggled over the last few years, then it might feel like a little bit more exciting of a prospect than, as you said, your team's 21-3. You've kind of built this juggernaut. You have this great culture. You've got all these players. You had done a lot of transactions in the offseason. You brought in a lot of really exciting free agents. I think by the end of it, the roster had kind of ballooned up to 65, 70 guys.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden you're going to have to slash that in half almost, right? And sort of go through multiple drafts and another free agency period. And so I'm wondering if you could just give us maybe a little bit more insight in kind of to the philosophy of what it was like to kind of go through all those different stages and having to, cut down, then add back, go after some of your own guys again in a draft, even though they were just on your roster a couple of weeks prior. I mean, it's kind of a crazy process when you look back on it and think about it. So I'm curious kind of what some of that was like and the conversations that were had, and just any window you can give into that kind of period of the last month or two.
Yep. Like I said, that one really was the hardest, because we're dealing with personal relationships, we're dealing with lives, we're dealing with careers. But, when that process started, Skip and I got together weeks in advance. We broke down every single roster. We evaluated our own, but we also had some changes of our own from the offensive line coach, D-line, defensive line coach, secondaries coach. So really not only remembering that, hey, this guy just helped us win a championship, but let's also keep our eyes peeled. Let's continue to look and evaluate. One thing that we've always touched on is we're willing to do kind of whatever it takes to win a championship, and we're willing to evaluate them. And we really do want the best players as long as they match from the intangible aspect in our building. So we didn't get them all back. Let me just tell you that there were a lot of good players that found new homes, and we're very fortunate that they had time here to spend with us and help us win a championship. And most importantly, we're looking forward to watching them flourish in a new team and in a new system. But we certainly didn't get the chance to get all of them back. And when we walked into the second draft, kind of our primary goal were to really go out and get our own back. Round one was kind of all about trying to identify and pick up the best of the best from the USFL conference. And part two was really about how well do these guys rank compared to our own? What's the value in somebody knowing your system, the value of somebody that's kind of sat in your meeting room already compared to the guy that maybe you don't know all too well yet. So we really hit home just in terms of having the value to go back and get some of our own and people that we believe in, people that we know that can help us win a third championship. And then also just having a chance to get new faces. I know we're extremely excited to watch Larnell Coleman come out and perform. We're extremely excited to watch Terrell Bonds to come out and perform. I know we ended up drafting a safety and then eventually trading for Bubba Bolden, and we're extremely excited to watch Bubba Bolden come out and perform. So for the past, from January on to February, I think we've done all the right decisions and brought in all the right people that will eventually help us be pretty successful this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And, looking ahead and thinking about the roster that you all have built, obviously there are some familiar names. I think I went through and counted up today. I want to say there's about 15 players that this is actually going to be their third year with the team. And so guys like, Jamar, CJ Marable, Marlon, we could go on and on. But then obviously there's also some guys that are back for a second year, whether they were with the team in 2022 and they're back in 2024, or they were with the team last year. But, almost, not quite, I think, but almost half the roster is new faces, whether that's guys that played for other USFL teams, whether that's guy that played for XFL teams, or whether that was guys that were recently in the NFL and are now on the Stallions roster. So I'm wondering, we kind of maybe are familiar with some guys, but there's maybe, there's a lot of new faces that maybe Stallions Nation maybe watched in college, or maybe just aren't as familiar with, because they were in the XFL or whatever the case may be. I'm curious if you could maybe just, you started to mention a couple guys at the end there, but maybe give us a little insight into some of the other names or players. I mean, I'm sure you could go through every single player on the roster and talk about why you're excited about them and why they sort of made the cut to be one of the 75. But, I wonder if you could maybe just mention a few names, some guys that people might want to start kind of getting on their radar and looking into, because you expect them to maybe really be able to be a big contributor in this next year. And, a lot of people, I think, will want to know about maybe two recent signings that just broke, a familiar face and a new face. DeMarcus Gates, who I thought arguably was maybe our best player in 2022, bringing him back on board. And then you also brought in a fourth quarterback. Skip had kind of hinted in some interviews that there might be another quarterback. And so already had a really wonderful and talented quarterback room, but you brought in another guy, Matt Corral, who's, a third round draft pick and has kind of a unique skill set. So wondering if you could talk about, guys like that, and then any other guys you feel like we should maybe be aware of heading into this training camp starting in a week.
Absolutely. One, just from the valuation portion of it, I know we kind of talked a little bit about it. All these players are here for a reason. We're just trying to figure out why. So when you see somebody that's undrafted and spent 3 to 4 years on an NFL roster all of a sudden come free, there's really multiple reasons as to why that player became free. If you take a look at some of the young guys that maybe have had the chance to be drafted, and then all of a sudden maybe a year or two later, they're out on the street. So there's multiple reasons as to why every player here. Sometimes it's talent, sometimes it's maturity, sometimes it's mental, sometimes it's that, hey, they're coming from a smaller college and they need the chance to develop. But really, if you just wanted to talk, you're absolutely right. Could I run through every single player? We could talk about the pros or how we see from a scheme fit, system fit. We could talk about that from every single player. Every player we bring in, we have an identity that this player can help us win. We walked in last year to last training camp thinking that every player we brought in had a chance to be a starter. And I really believe we feel that way this year as well. And you never know what can happen week 1, week 2, week 3, whether if it's injuries, whether somebody, quite doesn't pan out, whether if it's a wrong, scheme fit, system fit. There's all sorts of things. So just in terms of building your roster, you're always trying to help players. You're always trying to help your team by grabbing players that can help you win. So, really just starting off kind of on the offensive side of the ball. One, I'm really excited to watch Larry Roundtree. He's somebody that we did our homework on for probably 2 months before the deal finally closed and he signed with us. And, just having a kind of another dynamic big back that can help you from not just from a production standpoint, but he's kind of a north-south runner. Kind of reminds me a little bit of David Montgomery, a little bit of burst out of the backfield, contact balance, some home run speed to him at times, just in terms of how do you compare them to how they translate to the NFL compared to, what they were in college, and kind of how we always see fit from their college days, more or less translating a little bit better to the UFL rather than watching a guy in the NFL and going, well, hey, he's going to translate to what we saw in the NFL. Just the majority of the times, that's really not the case. And always going back and having a chance to watch him in college is kind of our way of evaluating and having from a prediction standpoint of how they may fare in the UFL. So Larry Roundtree, somebody we're excited about. We're extremely excited about Amari Rogers, Benjamin Victor, having Victor Bolden back, having Gary Jennings, somebody that maybe wasn't quite utilized, whether for this production scheme, coming on a little bit late to the scenes, but really understanding what we have in terms of his offensive skill set. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. He clocked a low 4.4 at his pro day, but just trying to figure out why he's not in the NFL. And if you always take year by year by year, you can kind of figure out that sometimes players are just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes in the NFL, all it takes is one hamstring and you're cut out of the NFL. And that's why we believe it's extremely important to evaluate them from their college days, but then also look to try to figure out who they are right now as a player. And that's mainly from an athleticism standpoint, mainly their desire and hungriness to potentially get back to the NFL, but not only get back and, battle in training camp and maybe push for a practice squad, but potentially push for that 53, a lot like Khalil and Aubrey did this past season. Offensive line, I'm extremely excited about Deontay Brown. Not only is he from the state of Alabama, but one, he's somebody that got a lot of draft love coming out of college. It's hard to find people with that height, that size, with that good of feet. And he's somebody that hopefully we can count on those third and 1, 3rd and 2 short yardage situations. On the defensive side of the ball, I know that's something that we certainly wanted to ramp up from year 2. I think if you go back and look at year 1, we were really good on defense year 1, and most of that is we had some great players, some really good players in year 2. I think we kind of had some injuries on that side of the ball. We had to make some unfortunate cuts for multiple different reasons, and obviously we ended up getting it done. And I still believe we had a top half defense in the league, but paying a little bit more close attention to the defense on year 3, we signed great players: Marvin Wilson, Jalen Twyman, Curtis Weaver. We went out and got not a lot of people know about DeMarcus Mitchell. He's somebody that kind of completes from a pro prospect and in terms of the valuation aspect, really compared a lot to Dondre Tillman that we already have in-house. Linebackers, obviously, people ask me all the time, what's the best position room in the Stallions? God, I have no idea. We're pretty fortunate to have the type of talent. Looking at the secondary, I know we spoke a lot about Bubba Bolden, and then from a cornerback standpoint, is Chris Jackson, 7th-round draft pick out of Marshall, that's played hundreds of snaps in the National Football League, not only as a boundary corner, but also played a little bit of nickel. And then also a young player that believed in his ability and believed in the process of spring football and kind of see a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel is Mark Milton, who was a undrafted rookie, one of the top 4 highest paid undrafted rookies in his class. I spent time at Carolina, and if we're talking about why is the reason he's currently not in the NFL, go look at Carolina, go look at how many transactions they made during the middle of the season at the cornerback position. Then he gets signed and cut 4 times at Carolina. He goes to Miami. Jalen Ramsey gets moved off IR to active roster in the corner because they're a contending team. They move the corner from the active roster, who's a little bit older than Mark Milton, down the practice squad so they can continue to have depth. And instead of Mark Milton doing the traditional path of jumping on a futures and signing what we call a blind futures in the industry, he decides to bet on himself and believes in spring football and understands that, hey, this is something from a path standpoint that can help me not only develop, but most importantly, get film continue to develop and work on his technique. And then hopefully next time when he's in an NFL training camp this August and competing for his spot in the NFL, his 400 snaps in the USFL can hopefully translate and hopefully help him make that NFL roster this time around. And hopefully that's going to be a trend that a lot of young players are going to continue to jump on. So if I just had to mention a few, those are probably the few that just come right off my head. And I'm telling you, we could talk about every single player on the roster because every player was brought here with the right intentions, and that's helping us win a championship.
Well, Zach, I know you're right. We could sit here and go through all 75 and spend the rest of the evening doing that, but I know you're a busy man and you've got a lot of other more important things to attend to. So before you go, I'm going to ask you one final question, just kind of a fun one here. I didn't give you a heads up on this one, so this is going to be off the top of your head. You're going to have to see what comes to mind. But I know you spent some time on the ground in Birmingham the last 2 years. Birmingham, as a city, doesn't always get the love that maybe it should, but one of the things that I think people do know about Birmingham is that it has a really incredible food scene. So I'm wondering if you have a restaurant or two from your time in Birmingham that you would shout out, maybe, some fans coming from the XFL side of things or maybe visiting Birmingham for the first time. If you got any favorite places that you'd show some love.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Number one, kind of my go-to year one, just because all of us coaches lived in the hotel year one was Eugene's. I'm telling you, I'm still missing it. I've already, me and Coach Holtz have joked about it. Like, hey, when we get on the ground, how the heck do we, escape away for an hour to go pick up Eugene's? And there's somebody that catered for us a couple times year one. There's a funny story. That's first place me and Coach Holtz ate at. We were with Kevin Sumlin. They flew us in for the draft, and we just Googled the closest food places near the hotel. And I had the chance to meet Kevin Sumlin, which, I was 21 years old, and having the chance to sit down between Skip Holtz and Kevin Sumlin and just hear college story after college story was incredible. And having the chance to eat at Eugene's and be in that environment and be around great people, and you have random people coming up to them and saying, hey, how excited we are for the USFL to come here. And then you have Kevin Sumlin that was from the state of Alabama. Skip Holtz is now the Birmingham Stallions head coach. That place is forever kind of engraved in my heart, and every time I'm back in Birmingham, I obviously can't wait to go. And then second place that a lot of players put me on is a place called T-Bone's Philly cheesesteak. And that was kind of a staple for me. They were open. Birmingham's kind of a little bit weird on some of the hours standpoint. A lot of things close at 7. If you're a mom and pop store, they had a couple days where they were completely closed, and then outside of that, sometimes they'd be closed at 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock. So T-Bone's is kind of near the hospital, and it's open till 8 or 9. And then tell you what, $10 for a 12-inch steak and cheese Philly, about as good as they come. They're from that Philadelphia area. They moved and set up shop there, and they're great. They're great from a local standpoint, and just from a competitor standpoint, they're really one of the best that I've had. So I'm looking forward to having the chance to stop back and not only be in Birmingham, have a chance to play it protected, but then also have a chance to hit some of the local food chains that I haven't had in a while.
Awesome. Well, yeah, you definitely hit two good ones there. I know Eugene's. That's definitely, if you're coming to Birmingham, you're going to be, listening to this, maybe first time visiting the city, coming from St. Louis or San Antonio, some of these other places. You got to put Eugene's on the list. It's a Black-owned business, incredible food, and a walking distance from Protective. So certainly everybody needs to go there.
And I remember sitting there and Skip's looking at somebody across booth, and they're over there sweating. They got napkins. They're wiping off their face every 3 seconds. And we went up, and I think we ordered hot. And we were going, hey, what flavor did you guys get? You guys look like you're sweating. And anytime you're out with Skip Holtz, he is the most friendliest, outgoing individual I've ever met. So if I'm in public, half the time I'm just sitting on my phone. Half the time I'm texting somebody on a phone call. But Skip is Skip likes to talk. Skip likes to talk, and he's extremely outgoing, and goes, hey, what flavor you guys got? And they go, hey, this is just medium. So we knew we were in for a long night, and that hot certainly caught us all by surprise, and certainly one of the best places to eat at in Birmingham.
Absolutely. Well, Zach, this has been fun. Again, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this. I know I speak on behalf of all of Birmingham and the state of Alabama, really, and Stallions Nation when we say we really appreciate all the time and energy and effort that you've put into building a incredible football team that so many of us are so proud of. And we really can't wait for this next season. And certainly, you all have contributed to the incredible football culture that exists across Alabama, but now in a unique way with a professional team that we've lacked really for quite a while. And so, thank you again for doing this. Thank you for everything you've done for the Stallions, and we're really excited and looking forward to a new season in a new league and hopefully a third championship.
We got that right, and we're looking forward to hopefully having a chance to bring one back home again. And this wouldn't have been made possible without the USFL and the XFL merging together, without the constant support of our community. And we're all kind of looking forward to not only year 3 of the Birmingham Stallions, but really year 1 of what this league has to offer. And this is going to be exciting, and most importantly, we can't wait.
Absolutely. All right, Zach. Well, thank you so much, and giddy up.
Good deal. Appreciate it.